Aloha, everyone. My name is Rob Hack. I'm from the Hawaii Pacific Export Council. We are a district export council, of which there are 61 in the United States. We are the farthest west, the only one in the far Pacific, and it is our job to help Hawaii and Pacific Island companies export. And to be clear, exporting is to a foreign country. It's not California. It's not even to Guam, Taipan. It's to Canada or Japan or Brazil or Germany, what have you. And we are very thankful to DBET and SBA for our grant that allows us to put on this series of seminars and webinars and one-on-one company mentoring sessions. Today, there's a program we're running on U.S. commercial service and the American Chambers of Commerce overseas, and how you as a Hawaii exporter can use those services to your advantage. They're fantastic services, but you have to get in and get to know those people. And today we have a great set of speakers to talk to you about that. John Holman in Honolulu, and Bill Zaret is calling in from Maryland. We DBET SBA for the grant that allows us to put on this program. And with that, I would like to introduce Jamie Lum from DBET, who will talk briefly about the HiSTEP program in general, and then we'll jump into our speakers for the day. I would ask that if you have any questions,
Jamie, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, I guess it was Rob's side that it
Yes.
went dead. Okay.
Yeah, I know he's been having some.
Here he comes.
There he is. Okay, you're on mute, Rob.
I'm very sorry. Where did I cut off? I don't know when my Wi-Fi died.
It was about a minute ago.
Oh, okay. So again, I was just saying thank you to DBET and SBA for the grant that allows us to put that on. And with this, I'd like to introduce Jamie Lum from DBET, and Jamie can proceed with her presentation about HiSTEP.
Thank you, Rob. Let's see. My screen. Let's see my slides. Aloha, everyone. Thank you very much for joining our session today. As Rob said, I'm Jamie Lum. I'm with the Department of Business, Economic Development, and Tourism. And through a grant from the U.S. Small Business Administration, we administer a program called the Hawaii State Trade Expansion Program, or HiSTEP. And thanks to Rob and Hawaii Pacific Export Council, we do work together with HPEC as well as all the partner organizations that you see on the screen here to help to put this program together. So again, it's primarily funded from our grant from the SBA. It is a program to help new to export companies as well as companies that are already exporting to be able to sell their Hawaii-made products and services outside of the U.S. So the goals of the program are to help increase the dollar amount sales abroad of Hawaii's made products and services. We also want to see an increased number of companies that are exporting. And then we also would like to see more markets penetrated with Hawaii made products and services. So those are really what we're looking for in terms of our success metric. In order to be eligible for HiSTEP, you have to meet the federal definition of a small business. And the SBA standard is primarily a company that's 500 employees or less. And of course, we know that most businesses in Hawaii, as well as the US, would qualify. There are other requirements. You have to be in business for at least 12 months. And you have to have a product that has at least 51% US content, excuse me. So those are requirements by the SBA. You also have to show or just certify that you're not barred from receiving any federal funds. And then as far as some of our own requirements here at DBED, we want to know that companies are registered with the Department of Commerce and Consumer Affairs to do business in Hawaii, and you're also registered with the Department of Taxation for your general excise tax. Those are the basic eligibility requirements to participate in HiSTEP. So I'll just briefly, and this is kind of a higher level summary. Rob will send you a slide deck that has more details. So hopefully that would answer some of your questions. But I just want to do a little bit of an overview. So we have 3 components to the program. We have our what we call our export readiness, of which today's webinar is part of that. So with the help of HPEC, we put on monthly webinars addressing different topics having to do with exporting. So for instance, our topic today, we've done some on export financing, on e-commerce and digital marketing, things like that. We also have some specific sessions on markets, potential for Hawaii companies, and in terms of saying exporting to Japan, exporting to Taiwan, exporting to Canada and Mexico, and so on. So those are the types of topics you will see in the export readiness. The other part of export readiness is our one-on-one business advising sessions. So as I mentioned in the beginning, there are a number of partners that we work with, HPEC, the Small Business Development Center, the Women's Business Center, or in Hawaii, that would be the Patsy T. Center, our Veterans Business Opportunity Center. And so when a company, and I have a slide at the end that shows you really what the sequence is, but when a company signs up for the HiSTEP program, registers, what we do is then we assign you to one of our partner organizations, and then you'll have at least one session with a business advisor from the organization to talk a little bit about your company, what your export experience is, if you're new, what some of your goals are, kind of talk that through a little bit, and then they can help to advise you a bit about maybe some of the activities we have available through HiSTEP, or perhaps some other types of activities or events that may be even outside of HiSTEP that can help you reach your export goals. So that's all part of what we call export readiness. Our second component is what we call Go Global. This would be the Hawaii pavilions that we organize at different trade shows. It would be any consumer shows that we do. For instance, this year, so far, we've already done, we had a pavilion at the Foodex show in Japan, at the Natural Products Show in Anaheim. We have a consumer show coming up in July in Japan with the Hankyu department store. And then later in the year, in September, we're doing the Tokyo International Gift Show, as well as we're working with the Department of Agriculture to do Fine Food Australia. So those are just some of the shows we do. What we do is HiSTEP will subsidize the majority of the cost to be in those shows, and then we'll charge a participation fee to our companies. We'll go out and we'll recruit participants, and we usually do that for 4 months, 4 to 5 months, say, before the show. We'll start announcing that. So that's our Go Global. And then finally, we have our HiSTEP company assistance, and where companies can apply for actual direct financial assistance with the submission of an export plan. There's an evaluation committee that will go through the budget and plan. It is a competitive process, so there is an evaluation of each of the applications, and then awardees are selected, and it's awards are made on a reimbursement basis. And the kinds of expenses that can be covered would be things like your airfare to a trade show, costs for any trade shows, and it doesn't have to be a trade show that DBED or the Department of Agriculture is organizing. It can be any trade show that is part of your export plan that you feel is one that's suitable for your company and your export goals. It can be used for some of the U.S. Commercial services, of which I'm sure John will cover some of those things. It can be used for website translation, or an international marketing plan. So those are just some of the examples of the company assistant used for. So those are really the three main components of the program. If you're interested, you can go to our website, which is invest.hawaii.gov. And if you go under the exporting programs and go to HiSTEP, you would fill in a registration form, and then and this shows you when you submit your registration form, then we'll assign you to one of the partner organizations. You'll have your session, and then you can sign up for any of the activities that we have, or any others. Let me just say that company assistance, we actually put that out once a year. So we have actually already awarded for 2025. We normally put the application out in the fall. It's typically out in early November, and the deadline is in January. So companies will have a chance at the end of this year to apply for 2026. So that's really just a quick overview. Like I said, there's my contact information. Rob will send you a slide deck that has more details of the program, and please feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions. If you don't catch my contact information, you can always contact Rob, and he can get your questions to me as well. So thank you very much again for joining us today, and thank you to our speakers today. Aloha.
Thank you, Jamie. Wonderful talk. And the HiSTEP program is really fantastic, and I'm glad to see so many of our local companies taking part in it. I just wanted to share my screen real quickly here and remind everyone that we at the Hawaii Pacific Export Council have a vast archive of these events, like the one you're participating in now, that we record. And after a little bit of editing, I will upload this video to our archive on YouTube. So if you just go to YouTube and type in @HPEC or just search for Hawaii Pacific Export Council, you will find our archive here. I also wanted to quickly point out the DBET website that Jamie was talking about. If you go to invest.hawaii.gov, and you'll see up at the top this exporting program. And then here is the HiSTEP program. There's also a tab for Tokyo International Gift Show, or TIGS, and the Hankyu Hawaii Fair. With that, I'm going to introduce John Holman from the U.S. Commercial Service in Honolulu. John, you've been here approaching 15 years, is that right? You know the area better than anyone. And John, by statute, is the executive secretary of the Hawaii Pacific Export Council. I asked him to speak today because I think he is really your window into all of the U.S. commercial service globally at the embassies and consulates around the world. In just the past few days, I've done some one-on-one company mentoring sessions with companies that DBET has sent our way. And for two of those companies, I think it's obvious that they need to get in touch with John, meet with John, and learn about the Gold Key service that is available to them in Japan or Korea, or wherever else in the world you're going to think about exporting to. And so with that, I'd like to introduce John. He can explain a little bit more about that. But again, I think that the U.S. commercial service is a fantastic asset that our companies should be taking advantage of. So John, please.
Thank you, Rob, and aloha, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here and great to see you, Bill and Jamie. Wonderful presentation. This is a really interesting topic, leveraging AmChams or American Chambers, because the AmChams can be a really great resource for you in country as you're developing your relationships in a country. The reason Rob Hack is here is because I met Rob Hack at a AmCham Singapore event about 15 years ago. And Rob was living in Singapore at the time. And he said, wow, you live in Hawaii? That sounds great. And we had a few conversations, and then we recruited Rob.
I didn't think people lived in Hawaii. I thought they just kind of visited Hawaii. That's all.
Right. And now Rob has been here. How long have you been here, Rob?
12 years.
12 years. And you've been helping companies, mentoring exporters, running the Hawaii Pacific Export Council's education programs. And it's due to that connection that we made at the AmCham in Singapore. And sometimes people ask us, I'm going to talk about what we do at the commercial service, but a little plug for the AmChams. It's a great network of American business people and foreign business people that are wanting to be in the atmosphere of U.S. businesses in country. And sometimes I get asked by companies who say, hey, we want to source our products from somewhere in another country. We're not involved in that. In terms of what we do is we do export promotion, but sometimes the AmChams can be a good resource for you if you do any sourcing abroad. So just something to check into. And if you travel to any countries, particularly in Asia, I always recommend connecting with the local AmCham. They usually have a full slate of events, sometimes talks or networking events. And it's a really great way to get more deeply plugged into a market or get some local expertise on just what is happening in that country. So just a little bit on the topic of AmChams. Now, I have some slides to share with you, and these are my regular slides. And I just have to say that these are not regular times. So the slides I'm going to share with you are kind of an overview of the resources that we offer and some things to think about as you're doing business internationally. And I have to put a big asterisk in the world of international trade right now, in that there are a lot of things in flux right now, as you know. Typically, we say that it takes 18 months for a new exporter who's never done business internationally to kind of get up to speed and to enter into a new market successfully. Now, it certainly can happen faster than that, and it does. But in normal times, it takes a little while to develop that strategy, meet with the right partners, and to grow your business in a new market. In these uncertain times and with changing tariff rates, who knows? That could be longer. There could be barriers that pop up that weren't there yesterday and vice versa. So I mention that because I think for most companies, it's wise to craft a strategy for your business, take a bit of a wait and see approach in terms of to see how trade policy shakes out in the near term, and then also to invest more deeply in your website for cross-border e-commerce, because shipping individually to consumers can be a little easier in times like these when there's so much uncertainty versus shipping larger quantities of product and navigating various changing tariff rates and regulations. So just a little caveat there for you. And I do encourage anyone who has questions to drop questions in the chat, and I'll do my best to answer those as we go forward. So let me pull up my slides here to share.
John, there's a quick question that I'm going to
Sure.
interrupt you on. There's a question about what is AmChams? AmCham is short for American Chamber of Commerce. And there is a US, I mean, it's a huge organization based in Washington, D.C., the American Chamber of Commerce. But in practically every country in the world, there are local American chambers of commerce too. And that's what we're referring to when we say AmChams. Okay.
Yeah,
thanks, John.
Rob. Thanks for that clarification, because we use lots of acronyms in government and people don't always know what those mean. And I'm not sure if the AmChams in various countries are even connected. I think they might be individual entities, but with the theme that they are the American Chamber or the business hub for American businesses.
That's correct. Typically, they're locally operated nonprofits under the nonprofit scheme of that particular country, and they quasi report into the U.S. Chamber of Commerce in Washington, D.C. But perhaps Bill was chair of AmCham China. He can chime in and explain it pretty clearly.
Yeah, I think you guys have covered it pretty well. There is a loose affiliation in Asia of AmChams. It's the American AmChams in Asia Pacific or something like that. And as a matter of fact, they will be coming to Washington in July to do an outreach with the U.S. government, just as AmCham China had done in May. And I'll go into that in a few minutes.
Yeah, and Bill, since you mentioned that, and in case you weren't planning to mention it, there's a group of AmChams, I believe in the ASEAN region, that does this business survey every year, right? And then they share those results in terms of what they're seeing in each market, what the trends are, where the risks are, what they predict for growth in the coming 12 months. I'm not sure if you're going to mention that, but I just wanted to highlight that because that's a really valuable resource to see what's happening in these various countries and what the pulse is in country.
Right, John. It's very helpful.
Okay. Great. Well, let me share these slides so that we can get to you, Bill, and a little bit about doing business internationally. Now, 95% of the world's consumers are outside the U.S. The purpose of this slide is really just to let people know that we know how local business can be here in the islands. And if you're selling the U.S. mainland, great. And there's still massive markets internationally in other countries. One thing I learned recently is that 70% of consumption happens among populations that are 40 years and younger. So depending on what your product or service is, you may be looking at what countries have younger populations like Vietnam, like Indonesia, where as you're looking to grow your business, does that fit with a younger demographic? And if so, that might be one of the considerations you factor in as you develop your strategy. And it's good to diversify your business. So we see economic fluctuations here in the islands, in the United States. And when business is down here, it may be doing well elsewhere. So one of the benefits of doing business internationally is diversifying your customer base. And then business facilitation, especially through e-commerce and cross-border e-commerce, it's easier than ever to do business internationally, generally speaking. A misnomer is that only large, massive multinational companies can do business internationally, when in fact we find it's the opposite. It's small businesses and oftentimes very small businesses. 75% of U.S. exporters have less than 20 employees. That's the size of business we typically see here in Hawaii. And the Hawaii brand is well known, well regarded around the world, even in places where people have never been to the islands. They attribute positive aspects to our products and services that can help you to command a little bit higher price for many, especially value-added products. And so that's something to keep in mind. But also know that people, especially in Japan, not everybody loves Hawaii. Sometimes there's this idea that just every single Japanese person loves Hawaii and Hawaii products, and that's not always the case. So we want to have a little bit of targeting those markets where there's potential, but also realizing that there may be segments in those markets that are best suited for your product or service. What are Hawaii's top exports? Well, services comprise most exports in terms of dollar value. That includes travel and tourism, education and training. When we have students or visitors coming to the islands, bringing money into the state, those are service exports. We also see architecture, engineering firms here doing business internationally. And then the remainder is mostly in agricultural products and value-added processed foods. So macadamia nuts, coffee, cookies, other gift products, papayas, and spirulina, bioastin. That's one of our top export products. And then we see some apparel and cosmetics exports as well. What are the keys to export success? I've been doing this a while, and I try to make it simple for everybody, but there's kind of 3 keys to export success that I've identified. First is motivation. So really those companies that take advantage of programs like the HiSTEP program, that take advantage of the mentoring that's offered through the Hawaii Pacific Export Council, and then go abroad, go to trade shows, put themselves out there, meet with potential partners. Those are the companies that generate the greatest success. Even if there's lots of competition, even if there's other competitors out there that may be more capitalized, those companies that are out there and are motivated can find success. 2 is finding the path of least resistance. So what market can you get into in the least amount of time, the lowest cost, energy, and effort, and generate the greatest return? Then you take that experience and revenue and you reinvest it into the next path of least resistance. And we used to get calls for the China market. We don't get so many calls for China now, but for most exporters, China wasn't the easiest country to do business in. The same could be said for Japan. There are some cultural considerations in doing business in Japan. The Japanese government really scrutinizes ingredients and food and cosmetics products. So while those can be good markets, is it the path of least resistance for your business? And so doing a little bit of homework to find out where can you get into and grow your business successfully and then expand into another market is really crucial. And then having great partners. So people that are helping you to grow your business in country, who are ensuring that you get paid, who are there to help you protect your intellectual property, whether that's a distributor that you're selling to or a joint venture partner. It's really crucial to have great partners, and that's one of the things we do at the U.S. Commercial Service. Market entry strategy. So this slide, there's just one point to this slide, which is if the top line is all the things you do domestically, when you go to export, you don't have to recreate the wheel in all the same ways. You can just take pieces of it depending on what that market requires of you, and then you can grow your business. An example is Hawaiian Host. We helped them recently expand into the Korea market, selling products that they don't even sell in the US. Ice cream, cookies, and chocolate drink products. All they're doing is licensing their brand. They have a partner in Korea that does the manufacturing and distribution and promotion for them. And then they put Hawaiian Host on the labels, and they've been able to grow their business in Korea through licensing. So there's many different ways to grow your business. International commercial terms. There's one purpose of this slide, which is just to let you know that these terms exist, and they indicate when the title and ownership and liability transfer from you, the seller on the left, to the buyer. Remember that everything in a transaction is negotiable. So you may get someone asking you, hey, can you give me a quote FOB, which is freight on board? And you see there on the left side where that transition happens. But you say, well, we prefer X works right from our factory. Can you pick up the expenses and liability as soon as it leaves our doorstep? So just know that these exist and you can negotiate them. A little bit about the Commercial Service, our agency. We have offices in over 75 countries, most often at the U.S. embassies, and we're here to help U.S. companies to grow successfully internationally through selling their products and services. The latest figures are for every dollar in taxpayer funding we received last year, we helped U.S. companies generate $460 in sales. Quite a return on investment with your tax dollars. The companies that we work with, because Congress funds us with your tax dollars, we do have a few requirements. So it has to be a U.S. business with a product or service that's at least 51% U.S. content by volume or value. And we like to see that you have some sort of export readiness. So that is, you have an export sale in process, you've identified the path of least resistance for your business, and you've taken advantage of trading programs like the HiSTEP program. You've done something like Export University, and you have a sense of where you want to go with your international strategy. And then we can help you to take the next steps. We do that in these four main ways: through market research, market intelligence. These are the trends. This is what's happening in country on the ground, and we can provide you with that information so you know where the opportunities are, and maybe sometimes when it's not a good time to go after a market. We do matchmaking at major trade events, both domestically when there's an international component and in country. We also connect you with pre-screened quality partners through the Gold Key service and through our international partner search. We want to do due diligence checks to ensure that you're protected and the partners that you're going to work with are high quality partners that have your best interests in mind. And then consulting and advocacy, all the questions that come up around doing business internationally, intellectual property protection, customs, documentation, standards, we can help you to answer those questions. Some additional resources to check out: trade.gov. There's a wealth of information on there on looking up tariff rates, on learning about basics of international finance and logistics. We also have our local website, hawaiiexportsupport.com. And then there's some free videos Rob mentioned already. Here's another link to the HPEC library. And then there's my contact details there for any questions. And then let me check the chat to see if there's any question. Oh, I don't see any questions on my side, but if anyone has a question, feel free to drop that in the chat.
Could you walk through the process of a small Hawaii company needing to meet some distributors in Japan and having the U.S. Commercial Service Gold Key service capability at the embassy in Akasaka in Tokyo or at the consulate in Osaka? How does that work, and what does it approximately cost for a small company, right? I used to hear last time I did it, it was about $900, but this is the kind of fee that that the HiSTEP program will cover. So if you could just walk somebody through the process, because I think it's invaluable. Even if you had to pay $900 in cash, it pays for itself many times over.
Right. Yeah. So if a company approaches me and says, hey, we want to find a partner in Japan, first question is, are they already talking to someone, especially in Japan, because there can be somewhat of a verbal contract in Japan, but we want to know, are they talking to someone? If they are, we can do a background check to ensure that that's a legitimate business, that they have a good legal and financial standing in that country. If they're not talking to anyone, that's okay. We can then reach out to potential partners that meet their criteria. So let's say they sell the Whole Foods here in the islands, and they say, well, this is kind of our demographic, and we're wondering if there's any Whole Foods-like retailers in Japan that might be interested in carrying our products. We could then contact retailers that meet their criteria, or maybe distribution partners that get into stores like Whole Foods, tell them about the Hawaii company and what they do. And then those that are interested in pre-screen, we can arrange one-to-one meetings for the Hawaii business and those firms. The cost of that service, the front end, we can do something called an initial market check. It's just $350, where we do all that upfront research and then provide a readout with contact details of interested partners. So very inexpensive, and these are high quality potential partners. If they want to move forward with meetings where we facilitate the meeting with a translator, transportation, that's $950. And they can do the initial market check, pay $350. If it comes up positive, we can then apply that to the meetings fee and then set up those one-to-one meetings. But we also want to make sure that there is legitimate verified interest. Occasionally, the feedback we get from in-country is there's not a lot of interest in this particular product at this time. Maybe there's some other things happening in the market, especially with currency rate fluctuations, which we're seeing more of recently. But if there is interest and we see these as potential partners, then we'll arrange one-to-one meetings for the local business. And then, like you said, the DBEDS HiSTEP program, those funds can be utilized to cover those costs, including travel costs of going to the market and meeting with the partners.
One of the things I've always found fascinating about the U.S. Commercial Service is that at the embassies and the consulates, there will be a commercial service officer or two, an American person who kind of rotates through to different countries every 3 months or so. But inside, working with them and for them are local career staffers who will work at the U.S. Commercial Service until they retire. So they might have 25 or 30 or more years of service locally, developing a market expertise in terms of a specific industry or a portfolio of industries, but also making contacts. And so it's very easy for these local commercial service staff to help find distributors or key customers or that sort of thing, right? And I think it's really a fantastic asset that our companies should be utilizing more often. Okay. With that, John, there are a couple questions in Q&A, bear with me. Here's for packaged food products. Do we need to package separately in the language exported to? And I would say, generally speaking, yes. Definitely in Japan, it's the law. In Canada, you also have to put it in French. So you have to check each market locally and see there's not one sort of blanket yes or no answer to this, but the U.S. Commercial Service locally can explain the intricacies to you very clearly. Did I answer that for you, John?
Yeah, I would agree, Rob. So it varies by country. A couple things to know. One, I think finding that key partner is important first, and then you can work with them. And let's say you find a partner in Canada and you say, hey, can you help me figure out this packaging thing? Because I don't speak French, but maybe you have some insight on how to best do this, or maybe you can help me with the labeling. So that's something that's negotiable as well. And then with the HiSTEP program, if you get grant funding, and let's say you need to print some new labels with French language on it for the Canada market, you can utilize those grant funds from the HiSTEP program to help cover the cost of doing that. So that's another value out of the program.
Absolutely. One more question. Can the U.S. Commercial Service arrange for distributor introduction meetings via Zoom or Teams or something like that? Or does it have to be in country?
Great question. We can do it. We found that culturally, some markets, they don't really like to do it. The Japanese are one. The Japanese really want to meet you in person, typically. And so what we do is if we were going to do a Goki, we would talk to my colleagues in that country and say, hey, what's the appetite for doing this Zoom type of introduction versus in person? Would that work? I will say if you can travel, I always recommend it because you're just get a much better sense of what's happening in the market. You can even go spend some time with those partners after we make the introductions to get to know them better. And if that's in Japan, you better bring some karaoke songs that you can sing. So it is best, if possible, to go in person, survey the market, meet people, develop those relationships. But it is possible to do Zoom introductions depending on the market.
I would wholly agree with John that yes, you can do it by Zoom. It was done during the pandemic, but I think you'll get much more out of it, and your potential partners will get much more out of it if you can do it in person. One more question. Will you do the initial market check not only for Japan, but also South Korea, Taiwan, or the Philippines? And I'll answer again and say pretty much anywhere in the world that there's U.S. Commercial Service capability, they'll do it. In fact, I just did one recently in Argentina, and it was very helpful for me. And we're working on another one going on in a few weeks in Uzbekistan. So I know that they can do this, but John, go ahead. And
you answered it, Rob. Thanks so much for the plug. Yeah. the nice thing is we have standardized services around the world, so that same service can be utilized in any country where we have a presence.
There's one service that I've used that is not exactly a gold key service, but it's called ICP, and I can't remember what that acronym stands for. But it was essentially doing a financial and legitimacy check of a particular company that I was interested in. Do you know what I'm referring to, John?
Yeah, that's an international company profile, and it's a background due diligence check on a prospective partner. And there's a partial check where we kind of look at what publicly available information on a legal standing, financial standing, and news perhaps about that company and share that in a report. And then a full check, which is $700. The partial is $350. We'll do more in-depth research and often interview people at the company. Sometimes some from the embassy.
That's what happened. They literally went out and checked the facility in Argentina, met with the people, took photos of everything, sent it to me. It was brilliant, really. For $700, it was, nothing. It was great. Okay, John, that's it. No more questions for you, but thanks so much. I encourage everyone to get in touch with John. Most of the people who DBET refers to me at HPEC, I tell them, please contact John as one of your first activities. So I hope everybody gets in touch with you and you can help them with the U.S. Commercial Service by opening up the world to all of those embassies and consulates. It's really fantastic. So thanks again, John. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you, Rob. Keep up the great work and great to see you, Bill.
Good to see you, John.
Okay, with that, it's a great segue into Bill Zaret. As we said, the title of this program was Exploiting the Fantastic Assets of the U.S. Commercial Service and the American Chambers of Commerce, or AmChams. But let's be clear, the U.S. Commercial Service is U.S. government. The American Chambers of Commerce are not in any way government, but they are private sector managed and run by business people around the world. I have been a member of various AmChams throughout my career, Singapore, China, Japan, Taiwan, Hong Kong, many. And with that, we have Bill Zaret, who spends a long time China resident, worked in China for, you can explain how many years, but many. And Bill was chair of AmCham China. And I thought that he would be a fantastic speaker to just share how a company in Hawaii could exploit a membership or a relationship with an AmCham and a huge AmCham like China. There are certainly much smaller AmChams, say in Vietnam or Thailand or some smaller countries. And then Bill also has some recent knowledge with AmCham China visiting the DC area and doing a Washington door knock activity. And he can share some of the things he learned during that visit. So with that, I'd like to introduce Bill Zaret, who you were in Hawaii like 4 months ago.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I've been making a lot of visits to Hawaii. Why
Great.
not?
Yeah,
Unfortunately, today I'm on the mainland, east coast of the mainland.
Well, great. So thanks for joining us, Bill. Please go ahead.
Sure. Well, thanks for the opportunity, Rob. I'm also an alum of the commercial service, but I was, unlike John, I was on the foreign side in mainland China, Taiwan, and Malaysia. And just listening to John talk about the commercial service, it reminds me what a fabulous program it is for U.S. companies. And so, bravo. And I have known John for many years, and also Dale Wright. Dale and I worked together overseas. These programs, the HiSTEP program from the DBET, the DEC, the commercial service, what you all are doing for exporters is just phenomenal. So thank you, Jamie, Rob, and John, for the work that you do, especially now in such a challenging environment. I'll probably be saying some things that you already know, so I apologize for that. Before I get into comments about the most recent visit that AmCham China made to Washington, D.C., just a few comments on AmCham China. We have 3 major AmChams in China, depending on which part of the country you want to go to. And of course, as Rob intimated, there are AmChams all over Asia. The organization which oversees, it's kind of an umbrella organization, which oversees all of those AmChams, is called AmChams in Asia Pacific. And as I mentioned, AmChams in Asia Pacific will also be making a visit to Washington in July. Now, a little bit about these visits to Washington. We meet, AmCham China's was a week long. We met with representatives in Congress, in the executive branch, with think tanks, and also with corporations. And obviously, our focus is on US-China, on the commercial side of it, the trade side. But when the Asia Pacific's AmChams come to town, they'll obviously have a broader focus. And just if anyone wants to get in touch with this umbrella organization, send me an email and I will connect you. I don't have their email at the moment. My email is williamzaret at icloud.com, or go through Rob. Rob and I will connect. In any event, just to give you an idea what we were doing in Washington, we bring some talking points with us, but we also are in listening mode. And as you probably know, the environment in DC is really quite toxic against China right now. So we're listening to hear what folks have to say. But when we do have the opportunity to speak, we like to share that we think communication continues to be of utmost importance in the relationship. We also think that US competitiveness needs to be a major focus for the US government and the US writ large in terms of education, training, government policy incentives to help us be more competitive in this environment in which China is becoming increasingly competitive in a number of industries. And the third point that we bring is the importance of US business presence in China. You know, we've heard a lot, especially from this administration, of how the administration would like to see US businesses leave China, and it would be so counterproductive. Any business that wants to do global business needs to be competitive in China, because China is becoming our #1 competitor. Anyway, that gives you a little bit of an idea. And after the week-long visits, I'm always exhausted, and that's why I'm here in Ocean City, Maryland, trying to recover. But let me share a few of the takeaways from those visits in DC. And again, I may be saying some things that you already know. I hope I'll be giving you some insights as to what's going on, and hopefully it'll help you make decisions with your businesses. 4 things I want to cover: the results of the US-China meeting in Geneva, the significance of that. That was in the weekend of the 10th of May. Does the agreement that came out of that meeting tell us anything about US and China's respective policies? Number 3, what the next steps in negotiations might be. And 4, which I think may be of most interest to all of you, how might other Asian countries, like Japan and South Korea, be negotiating bilateral trade agreements with the US? So first of all, before we go into anything, we have a breaking news here that the US Court of International Trade, which is the US main trade arbiter, yesterday overturned the U.S. president's tariffs. He is saying that he exceeded authority under the International Economic Emergency Powers Act, or we lovingly call it IEPA. So all of the tariffs back and forth are really beyond the authority of the president. Now, there are tariffs that are not included in this, and this is getting into the inside baseball with the United States Trade Representative. But I think the bottom line on this, we have to see, as the U.S. goes into negotiations with oh so many countries right now on bilateral trade agreements, if this court decision is going to affect the president's ability to negotiate, how it's going to affect the president's ability to negotiate, something which I think for all of us is very important to see, because those tariffs can not only make exporting and importing difficult, it could make it impossible. So let me just go through the 4 points that I said I was going to mention. We've been following, unless you've been living under a rock, you know that the US and China have been having a trade war, and that in Geneva a couple of weeks ago, they decided to roll back a lot of their tariffs. Now, it's better because basically before the rollback, international trade was almost impossible, especially for China, but also for other countries. And now it's just cutting off the better part of trade for China and for some other countries. Consider this, the average tariff on Chinese goods coming in is still about 50%, and US goods going to China is still about 30%. I think it's a positive indication, this meeting. It shows that two sides are willing to negotiate, and they have room to negotiate. But it's also interesting to look at what was not discussed. 4 major things that are part of the disagreements between US and China were not even discussed. Fentanyl is a big issue. The US does not want China's role in bringing fentanyl to the US, does not want that to be a trade issue. It's really considered by the US government as a moral issue. Bottom line, my opinion, the Chinese should be able to limit fentanyl and its precursors if it really wants to. So let's see how that discussion goes in the future. There was no specific talk of the de minimis talks that we have coming up, the de minimis exemption. And for small exporters and importers, this is important. So any item under $800 a day coming into the US does not have any customs fees. Now, the US is looking at, for China and Hong Kong, changing that so that these importers, or the folks that are exporting clothing and other low-ticket items to the US without paying customs duties, will have to start paying customs duties. Again, this is a big issue. It wasn't discussed. There was no talk with the Chinese about getting rid of China's permanent normal trade relations with the US. This is something that goes back over 20 years. And if the US decides to cancel the permanent normal trade relations with China, that would add another 30% tariff average to goods coming in from China. And I think the big one here that really wasn't discussed is the reason that we want to be talking with China in the first place, and that is China's economic model. It's structural issues in which it subsidizes state-owned enterprises with preferential loans and subsidies, and does not allow American and other foreign goods, oftentimes into markets, and with violations in intellectual property. So they've got a long way to go in talks. And we'll see how it goes. Now, also, I think it's very important for us to look at what this temporary agreement we have, which is only supposed to last 90 days until they can come up with a more permanent agreement. What this shows us about where the U.S. is in terms of China policy, where China is in terms of U.S. policy. You know, the U.S. has been going back and forth on tariffs. It's what do we want to do? Do we want to decouple from China, partially decouple, strategic decouple, isolate China, trade with China for our own benefit? It's really not clear. And what is clear is that the U.S. does not have a strategy, a strategic policy on China. Now, legislators that I spoke with and members of think tanks speak pretty much with one voice, saying U.S. must be more competitive to succeed and to succeed in China. And also, we need to, as I had mentioned, better education, training, and provide these policy incentives. And also, in terms of decoupling, we need strategic decoupling with China. In other words, let's keep trading in areas that make sense. In the areas of high tech, maybe we will limit the export of high tech and so forth. But the idea of decoupling with China is just a non-starter. So we have tactics. We just don't have a strategy. And some of these tactics now I see are including limiting Chinese students in science, tech, engineering, and mathematics coming into and staying in the US, and ways of trying to isolate China with our trade agreements with other countries. Now, it's worth noting that in Congress, we have a lot of clear-eyed people, and they know that we need to compete. And they also know that we can benefit from trade with China. But politicians are afraid to publicly say that. In one of our meetings, it was so instructive. We urged this person who was very eager to learn about China and understood the benefits, recommended that he make a visit to Chinese representative from a southern state. And he said, quote, "Do you want me to lose the election?" And that's how toxic China is right now. But looking at China towards the US, China's been preparing for this moment for years, whether it's indigenous innovation, self-reliance campaign, pouring billions into R&D and in information technology, electric vehicles, green tech, marine tech. Their dual circulation, which project, which is to export to the world, but bringing in only foreign technology, developing domestic self-sufficient market. So slowing trade with China will hurt them at this point because they still rely on exports to a great extent to drive the economy. And I think that whatever the result of the trade talks are with the US, that China will continue to muddle through, because let's face it, the Chinese Communist Party basically owns the state-owned enterprises, which is 60% of market capitalization in China. The Communist Party owns the banks. They own or rule the extensive domestic security apparatus, and they rule the military. So China is going to muddle through, and it's prepared to do that. Really quickly on what the next steps might be for negotiation with China during and after this 90-day reprieve that we have. My sense is we will not get to any of China's structural issues so that China's economic model will remain the same because it's been successful for them for the last 40 years. Why would they change now? But as in the phase one under President Trump's first administration, he made a deal, which was for the Chinese to buy billions of dollars in US agriculture products, healthcare, environmental technology products. Well, part of the problem with that is the US doesn't really have that much that the Chinese want to buy. They want to buy high tech, and of course, we don't want to sell that to them. But I'm making a prediction that the incumbent in this administration wants big numbers for any trade deal. And so in order to get those big numbers, not only will there be a Chinese promise to import billions of dollars worth of US products, but also I think the Chinese will agree to invest in certain industries in the US, using kind of the model that the Chinese used over the last 30 years for US investment into China. That is, that they will be joint ventures. So the Chinese will be minority owners, technology will be transferred, and so forth. Frankly, the right type of Chinese investment into the US is very beneficial for the US. And I heard a few people talking about the idea that we don't expect anything final to happen within this 90-day period, which is already into its third week or so. There may be 2 or 3 more 90-day periods before any kind of an agreement is made. And finally, and I think this might hit home the most, is how might other Asian countries, especially Japan and South Korea, negotiate tariffs with the US? You know, the US had a bilateral agreement recently with the UK with the UK. And if we look at that, I think that might give us an idea how agreements with Japan and South Korea may result. It was tariff reductions on cars and steel, preferential access for American exports in agriculture. And this is important to strengthen economic security cooperation and address non-market policies of third countries. That's targeted directly at China. So basically, the UK and the US agree to strengthen economic security cooperation against China. Now, this could be a template for agreements with Japan, with South Korea. It's hard to say, but I know that this administration is doing its best to isolate China by putting these addressing non-market policies of third countries in their bilateral trade agreements. I'm going to stop there. My time, it's about 20 minutes. And for those of you who are still with me, if you have any questions on AmChams or on China, let me know. Again, if you're interested in being in contact with the AmChams in Asia Pacific, I am happy to make that connection.
Thanks a lot, Bill. That's extremely insightful information and quite timely. I did have a question. A few years ago, I was a member of an AmCham China. I don't know how to put it. It was a membership program where you could be a member of several different AmCham China operations like Hong Kong, Shenzhen, Shanghai, Beijing, all at once. They had I forget what it was called, but it was incredibly useful. And the only reason I didn't continue it was the pandemic, and it just prevented my
Aha.
travel and everything like that. So I gave it
Yeah.
up. But it was really interesting. Do you know if such a thing still exists?
You know, the history of AmChams in China, including Hong Kong, is very interesting because so much of it has been turf wars. So trying to get all the AmChams together under one roof has pretty much been impossible. But
Sure.
there is an AmCham South China based in Guangzhou, and it has a number of branches in South China, and I'm
Mm,
sure a good relationship with Hong Kong. AmCham China, as it's called, based in Beijing, has a number of offices in Northeast and now in the Southwest. And AmCham Shanghai has an office also in Suzhou and I think somewhere else in the East Coast. And the AmChams are working together more and more. The problem is that each one was developed separately with separate founders, separate egos, actually different structures.
sure.
But I think that AmCham China, the folks there, AmCham Shanghai, AmCham South China, and AmCham Hong Kong are very happy to, to the extent they can, help people who are members in one connect with members in the other and with the other AmChams. It's a loose relationship, so there's really no umbrella organization right now for China.
Yeah, I understand. Then I'm sure you must have met people over the years that were doing things with AmCham Japan. And I encourage some of our attendees to look into that if you're traveling to Tokyo or Osaka, looking to some membership there. But they have membership for foreigners that are not living in Japan, or foreigners that are not living in Beijing, for example. There
That's
are
right.
membership types that
Yeah,
allow you to participate, but maybe you're not a full participant where you go to all of the meetings in person and you have voting rights in the
exactly.
organization, what have. Can you explain that just a little bit, how that
Sure,
works?
sure. And it's a smaller fee, as you would imagine, for someone who is in Hawaii but is interested in getting all the emails from AmCham China, AmCham Japan, getting the information, because frankly, one of the important aspects of these AmChams is information, market information. A lot of it comes through the committees, the industry committees, whether it's healthcare, whether it's chemical industry, you name it. There are special committees in the larger AmChams, like in China and in Japan. And the information and the I was going to say networking. No, you're not there to network, but you do have access to other members of these committees. And it's very, very valuable for anyone doing business in Japan. And I know that the AmCham in Tokyo has been very active. A former colleague of mine who was ambassador in Malaysia, Chris LaFleur, went on to be the chair of AmCham in Tokyo. And we call them people that are members of the chrysanthemum club. That's like being a so-called China hand. And there's just incredible expertise. The commercial service in Tokyo right now is headed by a former colleague of mine, Alan Turley, who is one of the most knowledgeable people about Japan and China. So I highly recommend getting in touch with these people. Again, either Rob through you, if I can help, you'll let me know. You've got my
Sure,
email.
of course.
I think it's extremely valuable, the AmChams and the commercial service offices.
Great. Well, thanks again, Bill. It was really great to see you. With that, I think we should wrap it up because we're a bit over time. But we'd love to extend our appreciation to our speakers, Bill Zaret, John Holman earlier, Jamie Lum at the beginning of the session from DBET. Thanks again to everyone. I will be sending around a link to a Dropbox folder that has some presentations in it. And this video will make it to YouTube in 3 or 4 days from now, and I'll send around to all attendees a link to that video as well. So thanks again to all of our attendees and our wonderful speakers. Again, this is Rob Hack from the Hawaii Pacific Export Council. Mahalo. Have a great rest of your afternoon.
Rob, mahalo, Bill.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.